Welcome to the table.
I think the Tories risk permanent, and I say this as someone who tends to lean more conservative. The Tories are risking serious and permanent reputational damage.
Let's not beat about the bush here. The Rwanda policy is essentially just racist.
There should be an acknowledgement that we need to take our fair share. And at the moment, we are the lowest per capita when it comes to taking a share.
Do you not think there are other methods
because Esther, the
helping?
problem of refugees is only going to exacerbate as we see things like, for example, climate change disasters affecting parts of the world.
You said, I don't believe they're genuine asylum seekers, right? That's a belief. You don't know that.
Welcome to The Table, a new discussion show on Byline TV, where we aim to have a productive conversation about things that matter, with people we might not always agree with. At this table, there's no hiding behind sound bites, every position must be justified, and no topic is off the table. At the table tonight, we have Nicola Thorp, actress and columnist, Esther Krakue, columnist and broadcaster, and Otto English, author of Fake History, 10 Great Lies, and How They Shaped the World. And me, your host, Marina Purkiss. And team, on to our first subject of the day, Rwanda flights. So, as we saw last night, government have been unsuccessful in sending its first flight of asylum seekers to Rwanda. We saw there were last-minute ECHR injunctions. The government say it's for processing, but Rwandan officials have referred to the scheme as permanent relocation. The scheme has received criticism from the Church of England, even Prince Charles. And is it value for money? We've got 100k per asylum seeker reportedly, and a £1.5 billion per year scheme. We've seen weeks of legal challenges as lawyers for organisations like Care for Calais and Detention Action say it's unlawful, but the High Court upheld the decision. So, what do we think? Does Britain have a responsibility to take refugees from the Channel? Over to you, Esther. You start the debate.
I know. This is a very touchy subject. I feel like I always, whenever I get into these, I have to kind of give caveats. Like, I'm saying this not because I'm racist or this or that. Ultimately, yes and no. The reason I would probably start with no, because I don't believe these people are genuine refugees or asylum seekers. And the reason for that is if you actually look at sort of one of the requirements to be seen as an asylum seeker in the UK, you can't have crossed come from a third country that's deemed safe to come to the UK. A lot of these men, a lot of these asylum seekers are able-bodied young men that are coming from France after paying people smugglers to make this journey across the Channel. I have a big problem with this for many reasons. And I think one of the biggest reasons I have, which is very personal to me, is the industry at large, the people smuggling industry, one that I've been very familiar with, that I've always been vocal, that I've had family members, I've had people that I've grown up with, that, you know, back in the early 2000s, the trend, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, was you stow away on ships. So cargo ships coming to Europe, to France, to Russia, for instance. And that was how people found their way onto continental Europe to then try and claim asylum. Right? Even though a lot of these people, again, were young, able-bodied men, the plan was they repatriate money back to their family after they make it into the country. I actually have one of these people. I can show pictures of when I was 12. I grew up with one of them up until when I was 19. And he lived with my family, and he was one of these people that made this journey. And he saved up for years for it. Another reason is, for every person that you see getting off these dinghies, which, you know, these are the people that are the topic of conversation. They're people that, one, couldn't afford the journey, couldn't afford the thousands of pounds to pay people smugglers to get them across the Channel. They're people that didn't make it across even the Mediterranean and have died in a horrible manner, just, you know, like carrion effectively in the ocean, that nobody ever speaks of, no one ever accounts for, because we don't see them, so we don't even sort of take their lives as valuable, right? And also there's the issue of even making the trip to, so let's say, to Libya, right, to make this journey from the Mediterranean and maybe to the Channel if you do make it. There are people that are enslaved as a part of this because, one, maybe they can't afford it, or two, they've been tricked by people smugglers, and it's now become such an industry that there's tens of thousands of black Africans that have been enslaved in parts of North Africa and the Middle East because of this industry. I don't think we should just focus on, you know, people that come here. I think it's tackling the industry at large. I've made my position very clear that I don't think these people are genuine asylum seekers, because I don't understand why you would leave the sixth largest economy in the world, which is France, which is also a very multicultural society, which is also very prosperous and developed, and then come to the UK.
Many of them do, though, so it's worth noting that the majority of them do stop in Germany, do stop in France.
And many of them destroy their paperwork as well. Because if you don't have paperwork, they don't know where to repatriate you to. That's why 80% of them actually end up being accepted into the UK, because they actually don't know where to send them back to. And I have to make this caveat that it's not that I lack sympathy or I don't understand it. I've often said, one of the things I think a lot of developed countries have a responsibility to do is to create initiatives and to give these countries and people in these countries a sense of hope, right? Imagine being a young, unemployed man and you feel like your whole future is ahead of you, but you're living in a system that doesn't provide opportunities for that. If you just had to take a boat from Libya to Europe and then maybe to the UK, you would do it, right? So I understand these people. But at the end of the day, there are far bigger, social issues that come from entertaining this kind of illegal immigration. For one, people that, for instance, are saying their neighborhoods are flooded. Our asylum system in this country is very broken, right? Most asylum seekers.
You could say that's by design, though, Esther.
Well, I do, and I've criticised that. I've always said, it's not just about funding; it's about the nature of it. Most asylum seekers and most people that are settled in this country as refugees are resettled in just 5 major cities in the UK. That's for most of them, right? And that's not a really fair distribution. But again, you have to look at, for an asylum seeker to be properly assimilated in society, they need the resources that a bigger city provides, right? If you live just on the outskirts of Glasgow, for instance, and you notice every year on year, you're getting increasing number of refugees coming in that are, taking all these resources, rightly so, to be able to integrate into society, you just think, I actually don't recognise this neighbourhood that I grew up in. Doesn't mean you're racist.
Glasgow got together quite famously, was it last year? And they all they flooded the streets and stopped an immigration raid from happening. There were huge cries from
this is not me criticising local. I just use Glasgow as an example, but this is not me criticising. But I'm just saying, to take the genuine concerns of people like that and say those people are racist, I don't appreciate that, because I don't think that's in the spirit of British society and British culture to say, actually.
I don't think it's that, but I don't think it's that. I think it's an awareness that this could be just the government throwing red meat to its voter base. But it's actually, will it even be a deterrent?
Okay, there's a lot to unpack in what Esther just said. I'm going to start at the beginning. You said, I don't believe they're genuine asylum seekers, right? That's a belief. You don't know that.
But they're not, according to
70%.
the government standards of what an asylum seeker is. And the main point is the fact that
they are, because 70% are qualifying for asylum.
I made the point because they don't have their documentation, right? Where do you send them back to if you don't believe that they're genuine asylum seekers? And also, why are you leaving a country like France on a dinghy to come to the UK?
That's the second thing I'd like.
That's a safe country.
But that's the second thing I'd like to unpack. So, as was just said, the vast majority of people who claim asylum in Europe don't come to the UK. We're way down the pecking order. So I say to people who say, why are they coming here? Why aren't they staying in France? I say to people, where would you go? Right? Where would you go if you were claiming asylum? Now, if you say that to most people in this country, they would say there was a civil war in the UK. Maybe a lot of people would try and go to Ireland, because it's next door, but say Ireland also got engulfed in that war. Where would you go? A lot of people would try and go to New Zealand or Australia or Canada or the United States. And why would they go to those countries? They would go there because they can speak the language, they feel they could assimilate quickly, they probably have family in those countries.
But you know what you've just
and that's
described?
the same reason why the majority of these people come here.
Choice. The way our asylum system works is, you're supposed to go to the next safe country.
You're not. There's
That's
actually
not true. That's not true.
It's
not true.
Imagine.
There's no obligation to stay in the first
Under
country.
international law, you can claim asylum wherever you like. It's not true. You have to claim in the first country.
That's not how we process asylum seekers. How we consider the application to be refugees in this country is, have you passed through a third safe country to come to the UK? I have a big problem with this idea that you have these people that are apparently so desperate that they need to come to the UK, that have enough money to pay these people smugglers to come across the channel. What about I will use the word genuine asylum seekers that are predominantly women and children from parts of the world that can't even have access to the UK, that don't have enough money to pay these people smugglers, right? I actually think they have a stronger case to be seen as genuine asylum seekers. I've often said the channels or the routes that the UK makes available for people from different parts of the world to actually become asylum seekers is very weak. And I have a problem with that. But two things can be true at the same time. You can say these young men coming over the channel are not genuine asylum seekers, but also say the UK should open up more realistic routes for people from other parts of the world that don't have access to paying people smugglers to come to the UK. I genuinely believe that, and I take that stance. But there's no way you can convince me that these young men that have enough resources to pay people smugglers are genuine asylum seekers. I refuse to believe that.
Nicola, what are your thoughts?
Ooh, okay. There's so much has gone on in the course of the conversation. I don't even know where to begin. I wanted to reiterate that 70% of people actually do qualify as asylum seekers. Just because you've landed in a safe country, it no longer means you're not fleeing a war-torn country. Yes, I accept that they might be in somewhere that you and I would consider safe. However, I have read so many reports of journalists who are on the ground, particularly in Calais, and are asking that question of asylum seekers, the question that the press love to ask, and we're asking each other on this table. You posed it to us. Why would you want to come to the UK in a dangerous dinghy if you were already in a safe country? The reasons that these people give are they have been beaten by French police. They have been raped and attacked in refugee camps in safe countries. They're escaping people smugglers. They're escaping human traffickers, sex traffickers. They don't feel like where they are safe. They feel like the UK, many of them don't even understand very much about the UK, just that it is not where they currently are. And there are other people who have fled and they believe, and I think we should actually be proud that this is a place where people idealistically would want to end up, and look how we're treating them.
I'm really happy you made that point, because actually, and again, this is a personal anecdote, but I do think it rings true of what happens in the industry at large. So one of the guy that I said I grew up with that made the trip from Libya to the Mediterranean, now he's in Italy, and he was in a detention centre for about 3 years until he was finally released, and now he works at a mortuary, cleaning bodies and stuff like that. When he was being prepped for his trip across the Mediterranean, you have these, well, the smuggling gang, right? They teach you the kind of things to say to be able to make a stronger case for your asylum, for your, you seeking asylum. So he worked with this lawyer for 3 years, and it was an Italian lawyer that spoke a bit of English because he knew he spoke English. And he told him one of the things you have to say is you were beaten in your home country. He destroyed his passport, obviously, because he didn't want to be repatriated back. He had to say that he was being prosecuted because he was gay, right? And that actually, a part of it weakened his case because, Africa doesn't have a great record when it comes to LGBT or same-sex rights, but Ghana is probably high up on the list in terms of tolerance and stuff like that. So you have to find excuses around it. This is a man who got married the year before and had a giant party with his family that I couldn't attend because I was at university.
But where's he leaving them?
Because he was unemployed, and because he literally thought Europe. If you have to imagine the desperate situation these people come from. We're not talking just desperation in terms of war. It could be a reason, right? A lot of the times it's literally just economic opportunity. This is a guy who had 18 siblings. His father had 12 kids from one woman and 6 kids.
We have the worst economic growth next to Russia.
We are second only to Russia, who have sanctions.
A lot of these, predominantly West Africans, they come from large families. You're probably the 7th born son out of a family of 10, right? I understand the desperation there.
So that's a good reason to come as well, isn't it?
But this is the thing. You are not an asylum seeker.
Okay,
you are an economic
presumably,
migrant.
if you've come, look, the other thing about all of this is we need young people in this country.
Exactly.
And we need ambitious young people in this country. And this country's put up barriers to everybody coming in. If somebody like that, if somebody like that is so determined to come here and so determined to make a life here and so determined to contribute something to British society, we shouldn't be putting up all these barriers in the first place.
We should have the choice. This man is also.
Well, he sounds like a great guy.
He's also uneducated.
Very resourceful.
He's also of the 18. He grew up. He's a family of 18, right? Yeah. Not a single one of him or his siblings finished secondary school.
But if he's got the ambition to do that,
that's
to come
not
in.
enough.
It sounds like he's the kind of person this country needs.
Why have we ended up vilifying, apologies, economic migrants?
Villain, yeah.
Either or. Why have we done that? Because Pretty Patel's own parents, by the way, were economic migrants. My parents were economic migrants.
Well. But this is the difference. Here's the difference. And I'm happy you brought this up. One, those economic migrants had a certain level of education. Two, we get a choice. I don't believe that we should. I've often made this statement. Why should a Polish bricklayer get first dibs on coming to the UK over a Ghanaian doctor, right? Because I do think there's certain opportunities that you should open up to the whole world and let people compete for it. Survival of the fittest in that sense. I think the Australian model is the best model in terms of immigration because I don't think they have a closed door policy. Australia also needs young working people because they have a declining birth rate, right? But they get to choose the people that come here. I have sympathy for people that have the drive and determination and want to make it, but this is not the way forward. I have friends that came from Kurdistan, right?
How would you stop it then?
what do you mean, stop the illegal migration, or
how would you address? So you understand that the Rwanda policy is flawed. What would you suggest?
I don't even, to be perfectly honest, I don't even think we've even explored the possibilities. Do
you know what I mean? Because the conversation has kind of turned now to
we stop.
No, the ethics or your opinion about migrants and what we think.
I genuinely
these people who are, just let me finish. The people who are coming over here in boats are the specifics of this topic and what's going on in the news at the moment is the Rwanda policy and the ethics around that. You can't surely. Well, no, maybe you do.
So first of all, when I heard of the Rwanda policy, I found it a bit random, right? Why Rwanda? Why not like, I don't know, Canada or Australia or Tonga, for instance? I absolutely can support the argument that Rwanda is not the best country, right? We know that the Rwandan government has been sort of financing insurgencies and parts of the DRC because of the resources of the Tutsi majority community there that actually fund a lot of these natural minerals to the Rwandan government. So there's money there. There are terrorist links in that way. I can absolutely buy that argument, but I don't think, and I can absolutely buy the argument that there should be a better, safer third country as an option. But I do think we shouldn't just shut down the idea that they're taken somewhere else for maybe processing or even for permanent resettlement. Because if you look at it this way, if you're desperate enough to destroy all your paperwork and have no documentation, you're effectively an undocumented individual. What exactly do you want us to do with you?
Okay, let's not beat about the bush here. The Rwanda policy is essentially just racist. It's saying you've come from that place over there, that swamp beyond the English Channel, and we are going to send you back to a random part of it. Ha ha! That'll teach you. But that's
during the Syrian war, right? They sent a lot of refugees to Rwanda.
Well, I didn't know that, but it still doesn't make it right. It still doesn't make it right.
But also, how do we square the fact that the government is literally paying Brits to house Ukrainian refugees, and yet we are paying
exactly. Well, that was the point actually I was about to make. No Ukrainian will be being sent. No, there isn't a difference.
There is a difference.
What's the difference?
No, there is a difference.
Well, what is
one, Ukrainians have been registered. No, I'm sorry. No, I don't buy that argument. I don't think that's fair because one, Ukrainians have actually been registered as refugees under the UN agreement. And they will probably go back. And also, most of them found the next safest country, which was Poland or Slovakia or other neighbouring countries. They didn't catapult themselves in a massive slingshot and fly over the continent.
As many as most of the countries.
I'm sorry, no, but these refugees are coming from mainland Europe.
Most don't.
But also, going back to the point you made earlier, you said that people have to go to the first country that safe country that they pass through. Yeah. So unless those Ukrainians, well, I suppose they could have all flown here, presumably, but a lot haven't. A lot have made an overland journey to the UK. So why aren't people in the Conservative Party, for example, making that point? The point is, Ukraine is a hugely popular issue here for the government. The government plays the good guy. Boris Johnson is the saviour of the Ukrainian nation. Yeah. He's a wartime president. It's all a load of nonsense, but those are the things he's saying. They're not making those points about Ukrainians, and they're not making them because Ukrainians are European and they're white.
I don't dispute that fact,
right.
By the way.
So this is part of a much nastier, deeper, racist conversation, essentially.
I don't think and this is the thing. My issue is, for people that call this racist, right, because they think, we're trying to play our part in settling Ukrainian refugees, but not these undocumented, young, working, able-bodied men that are coming across the channel that have enough resources to pay people smugglers. And I just think, okay, so what would you do about the people smuggling industry? Because I have to remind, I'm not just speaking on the individuals that come here. I'm talking about the industry at large and the bigger tentacles it has on the continent that we don't even take an interest in because it's not surface level and it's not sexy enough to
Nicola,
say.
what's your point?
How many people smugglers exist for Ukrainians?
I don't imagine there are very many.
Because?
They don't need to, because there's literally rules.
So that's how you stop the people smuggling for people from other countries?
What do? Murder them, find them and kill them? Like,
So the whole point of this policy as well is to act as a deterrent, right?
I'm sorry.
Is this going
opposite
if you remove, it's a bit like drugs, right? Okay. How do you get rid of drug smugglers? You legalise drugs, yeah?
Yeah.
How do you get rid of drug gangs? You legalise drugs. So you've got this ridiculous situation where drugs are illegal.
Because if you what that would translate into an immigration policy is an open borders policy, right?
I don't
Because
agree.
No, it's not. There's not. There is a
That's
middle
the
ground,
point.
Esther.
No, but that is the point, because if you legalize drugs, for instance, anyone who wants drugs can take it. There's no limit on it. If you
That's not
apply
true.
the same
It's regulated. It's legalised but regulated.
But that's the point of it being legal. It's not. There's no barriers.
There are barriers.
Whether you
There
want
are.
to take
I
it.
can't get the morning after pill every day without answering a questionnaire. The
But you
doctors
can
would
still-
flag up the fact that I
Hold
was
on.
taking
If you
the morning after
legalise
pill every day.
cannabis, I can have access to cannabis. Period.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
but not.
if you legalise,
it would be prescription. Also, it could be regulated
but
exactly
do
like
you
I said. Like the
understand-
morning after pill is completely
but
legal.
there are no
You have to
barriers.
complete. There are barriers.
So how? Okay, so if you
Something called-
if
is
you
literally
legalise
called
weed and you
over-the-counter.
wanted to buy weed,
Prescriptions.
would they tell you you're
Prescriptions.
not allowed to buy weed?
Well, a doctor
You have
might.
a right to.
You can't go to the
It's
doctor and
legal.
say, "Can I have some sertraline, please?" They have to give you a prescription to say, "There you go."
But you can
But
just
to buy alcohol, you have to be what?
You have to
18
show your
or 21,
ID.
you have to show
But the
ID.
point is, but you can always work the system. You can always game the system.
Guys, another
if I
another-
wanted sertraline at university, all I had to say was, "My boyfriend dumped me, and I'm going to shoot myself."
Oh.
I'm sorry. Like, there are ways to game the system. I do not think that the best way to and also, this is not a country with infinite resources, right? You can't just say the best way to tackle this would be to legalize and have an open borders policy.
We're not saying that. We're saying
you get
control.
rid of-
Control
Okay, how do you
measures.
control it? Because
I think
it's
I
getting worse.
personally think there needs to be an acceptance that per country, perhaps per all these countries on the world index of most dangerous countries, there should be an acknowledgement that we need to take our fair share. And at the moment, we are the lowest per capita when it comes to taking a share.
Do you not think there are other methods
Because Esther,
of
the
helping?
problem of refugees is only going to exacerbate as we see things like, for example, climate change disasters affecting parts of the world. The more we continue to sell bombs to Saudi Arabia, for
I have a humanitarian
example.
question to ask you. Why do you think? Because I also don't think people understand the desperation it must take for you to leave your friends and family and everything you've known behind to go to another country. And I think this is often something that we don't talk about when we talk about any sort of refugees or asylum seeker. Why do you think, on a humanitarian level, the best way to help these people is not to improve the conditions that they live in that could be better, but to ship them to a completely different country and have them assimilate and integrate in a way that is effectively going to turn their lives around? They have to learn a different language.
Oh, so do you want to answer that question and then we'll wrap up this topic?
Okay, I'm going to make a couple of points there. We used to be a member of the European Union. We've left the European Union. Since we left the European Union, and one of the big planks of Brexit was, if we leave the European Union, we will stop all of this happening. Well, since we've left, more migrants have come. We play no part now.
Because most people don't understand that.
Yeah, but we play no part now in the European Union. So we can't collectively work with our partners effectively to tackle people smugglers and things like that. But
I don't agree with that.
well, not to the same level, because we're not engaged in that in the European
But also,
Parliament.
we were never part of the Schengen zone as well, so we don't have that same collective responsibility as we would have had. And also, I do agree with you that, you know, us leaving the European Union hasn't helped the situation in terms of, I suppose, inter-country relations in that sense. But at the end of the day, this ruling that has happened on the sort of Rwanda plane is not anything to do with the
Council of
Council
Europe, yeah, yeah.
exactly, which is completely different, which people don't understand, which is going to be sensationalized by the media, you know. But I generally think, on a humanitarian level, we should ask broader questions as opposed to, oh, just let them in and this will stop happening. What is the best way without having to, because you do realise that has
But
domestic impact.
the
as
second
well.
point you made a moment ago, I actually agree with. You were basically saying that we need to give more foreign aid to other countries.
yeah.
In order to help them. But this government is slashing foreign aid,
Yes.
and any foreign aid
Yeah.
gets lambasted in the tabloid papers.
And it's also
So-
poorly spent.
and it's-
I take
no,
that.
no, that's another issue.
We're going to have to
They
wrap up
never
there.
work.
We'll continue this after.
Wonderful discussion. I feel like we're never going to. We didn't even get to the fact that, you know, whether this is going to work as a deterrent, which is its prime raison d'etre.
Very pessimistic about
But
that, by the way.
let's shift gears. Let's move on to the next topic. So, Lenny Henry. So, I'm not sure if you saw this. So, yesterday in a Times radio interview, comedian Lenny Henry talked about representation of ethnic minorities in British life. He was looking at Glastonbury Festival in particular. He said he's always surprised by the lack of black and brown people at Glastonbury Festival. He said it's interesting to watch Glastonbury and look at the audience and not see any black people there. Now, Glastonbury co-organiser Emily Evers said Stormzy's 2019 headline performance was the first by a black artist in the festival's 50-year history, but was perhaps maybe a little bit late. So, on to Lenny Henry's comments. Otto, we'll start with you this time. Was he wrong to make those sorts of comments?
No. I am a white, heterosexual, middle-class, ex-public school male. I am the very at the very top of the pile of privilege in this country, and I look at the Glastonbury audience and I think the same.
Yeah.
That doesn't reflect. It doesn't reflect British society. Glastonbury's been going for years, etc., etc., etc. It's changed in its, but I mean, how you change it, I don't entirely know. I suppose you have to make it more appealing to a broader mix of people across the base of music, which...
It's not just different music taste. You never catch me.
Well, that's what I mean.
Music taste isn't racist, though.
Yeah, no, yes.
I mean, if you want to catch me at a country music festival, I'll let you catch me dead, but you'd have to kill me to drag me there. And it's the same. I never see any white people at reggaeton festivals I go to in Brixton.
Yeah.
I don't think this is as big of an issue. I think it's a complete non-issue.
But Glastonbury isn't, I was going to say gender specific, genre specific, is it? It's supposed to encapsulate all. It isn't like a grime festival or a country music festival, but... So I think Emily Evis was absolutely right. 2019 was too late to put a solo Black British artist on the main stage. Stormzy absolutely killed it. It was amazing. I wasn't there. But 2019 was the last Glastonbury. We haven't had one since. I'm going to it next week. I'm so excited.
I'm very jealous.
Audiences have been predominantly white at all main music festivals, because music festivals, I think, are slow to catch up. There have been huge movements in mainstream music, in pop music, of having more inclusive artists, making sure that Black women and all artists of colour are platformed, because ultimately, people who would have gone to see Glasto, or people who were watching it on their TV and saw Stormzy, they will now think that Glastonbury is for them. And that will change. Lenny Henry is absolutely right. It is interesting. He didn't say any more than that. He just said something was interesting, and we shouldn't lose our minds over that.
It's a really interesting bit of footage of which I see periodically of Bob Marley playing. I'm not sure what he's playing at, but I'm not sure if it's Glastonbury, but some massive festival, late 70s in the UK, and the audience is entirely white.
Yeah, it's nuts.
And it always. So I suppose it's always. Well, no. What I mean is, I suppose it's always been a bit like that. That white people predominantly go to festivals.
I mean, I've never heard of them.
Well, Stephen Allen on LBC, I tuned in just because it was an early start this morning. I don't normally listen to him. He actually said, is it a price issue? Is it a predominantly middle-class white festival because of the cost of the ticket?
And I go because it's quite expensive. It's out of my... I can't imagine anyone under 21 can afford it out of their own pocket, except for Bank of Daddy. But I also just don't think... Like, who cares? Do you know what I mean? I go to Wizkid festivals and concerts in London. Most people in this country don't know who Wizkid is, right? And I think, whenever people say predominantly white anything, I have to remind them this country is predominantly white, like almost 90%.
Yeah, but I think that's always said with predominantly white. Like the music festivals that I've been to, you do look around. Because like my boyfriend's Asian, and he will always comment if we go somewhere and he's like, "Ooh, it's just me," and it's never anything that's too sinister in his mind, but he just notices it. Equally, if we walked into a room and we're the only woman, you feel it. You just
Is that a problem?
Yeah, it can be in certain scenarios, definitely. But at a music festival, it's not necessarily a problem, but you might go there and think, is this for me? Or you might not feel welcome there. There's no denying that if you walk into a room and there's at least a few other people there who look or sound like you or have similar similar ideas on life as you, you're going to feel like you belong. And you're going to be more likely to go. It's not a sinister view.
Why I think it's a sinister view is because we're supposed to be above that, right? I'm not supposed to walk into a room and feel more comfortable because there are people that look like me or think like me. I'm sorry, I'm above that.
It's an unconscious bias, though. I think we'd like to all be above that, but we are programmed.
This is the thing I have to remind people. London is not the UK. Manchester is not the UK. If you live in other parts of the UK, what 90%
What about
of people
Leicester?
do. But this is the point, though.
I never get that. If London isn't, people always say it's like people say Twitter isn't real life.
It's not. One in five.
Although millions of people who are real are on Twitter,
But one in
real
five,
conversations.
that's hardly
But I never get why London. I get this. It's not. You get it from Scottish nationalists sometimes. I get it from
I get it.
London isn't the real world or something like this. London has 10 million people in it. It's like a sixth.
bubble.
Well, of course, but it's still 1/6 of.
population lives in London.
But London is still 1/6 of the British population. So I don't think you can just dismiss London as being... All cities are different. Bishop Stortford, where I come from, is very different to Harlow just down the road. Towns and cities have their own unique culture. Going back to the Glastonbury thing, I think the only point is maybe they should just broaden out the people who are performing, like more stories, and just and reduce the prices and just encourage more people in. I don't think you have to start saying, oh, there's this proportion of this race or whatever.
Exactly. I accept your point that crowds shouldn't matter, the makeup of crowds shouldn't matter as much, but they do matter when you consider the fact that only one black person, solo British black person, has headlined Glastonbury.
Do you know the percentage of black people in this country? 3%. And how many of them have the notoriety, fame, and/or talent of Stormzy?
So many.
0.0001%. I'm sorry,
so many.
But that is a reality, right? This is how I view it. I think if you move through the world in good faith, you don't see problems like this at every corner, because at the end of the day, people are free to choose. If there was an issue that prevented people of certain backgrounds from going to Glastonbury like prices, for instance, I would understand that, which is why I said reduce prices. But I genuinely think something like music taste, which is, you'll catch me dead at Glastonbury or any festival. I don't want to be around that many people. They stink. I don't want to be sleeping in a tent.
You're missing out, Esther. It's really good fun.
Princess. There's so many reasons. Even culturally, like I'm telling you now, up until probably the time I turned 25, I wouldn't be allowed to go to somewhere like Glastonbury or any sort of festival. Culturally, it's just not a thing. You don't allow your kids, especially your daughters, to go to these sort of festivals and spend the night. I wasn't even allowed to go on sleepovers until I was like 19. I think culturally there's an issue there as well. If you expect more sort of, I can only speak for sort of black people that come from a certain background, it just won't happen. Culturally, it's not a thing we do. It's very, 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 very tenuous. I have Indian friends and they say the same thing. You don't send your daughters to these sorts of things. It's just not really...
I heard that, by the way. Very strict Italian parents, but we're talking about, like, 19 plus, 20 plus. They can't control you forever.
I wouldn't even do that at 24. I'm not joking.
My goodness.
It's just very frowned upon. It's not... I mean, there's a cultural element to that we don't even consider, because we think that, I don't know, everyone is liberal and is kind of outgoing, but it's just not the case. I still, even now, it's a very specific kind of model that I've grown up in. I know everyone that I've known, even not of a sort of West African background, has grown up in a similar model. It's not just the fact that obviously, the kind of music they play and stuff like that. It's generally you spending days with thousands of strangers, you're using the same loos, you're in a tent and stuff like that. It's very not appealing to people of certain cultures.
Oh, it's very appealing to me.
Like Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, moving on to our final topic of the show. So, Lord Geidt, the government's independent ethics advisor. So he's the guy responsible for advising on ministers' interests and breaches, as we've seen, of the ministerial code. Yesterday, he was giving evidence to a Constitutional Affairs Committee over Partygate. It was a very interesting hearing. I'm not sure if you had the chance to follow any of it. So he revealed that he didn't have the power to investigate Johnson's breach linked to lockdown parties, and instead required a statement from the PM to launch the investigation. The investigation happened, and then the PM cleared himself of any wrongdoing. Guy appeared also during the committee hearing to cast doubt on the independence of his role, calling into question the appropriateness of the term independent in his title. So as we consider this more, and we see there are multiple reasons where we might need a Lord Geidt to keep things in check, is his position of independent ethics advisor fit for purpose? Nicola?
On what basis, sorry?
So in terms of he is the referee, right? He is the person responsible. It's his job to keep, to ensure that, he advises on ministers if and when they break the code of conduct.
Which is a load of rubbish anyway, because Johnson rewrote the code of conduct, taking away any reference to honesty and decency. So no, I
think the bigger question is just one person. Why is it not like a council? Why isn't it a group of them? Why is that just an independent advisor? Obviously,
also a lord,
exactly.
in and of itself.
The ironies, paradoxes, and jokes write themselves, aren't they? An unelected peer making judgments on Boris Johnson, and don't they know it? Yes.
I think the acquaintances is also very useful to point out. So if we remember, who was his predecessor who actually stood down after the Priti Patel recommendation?
Can't remember.
I've forgotten his name. So the previous ethics advisor who basically made the recommendation that Priti Patel had broken ministerial code with the bullying.
Yes.
I don't know
He
his
had
name.
to stand down because he'd offered his advice, which was obviously she'd broken it and therefore she should resign. And PM Boris Johnson overruled his judgment, which rendered the advisor's position basically
almost made me miss
pointless.
David Cameron.
So
is saying
basically,
something.
this is the position we're saying, or the position we're taking is this role just almost like redundant?
Well, it sounds totally redundant, but like it's just demonstrated that a lot of things in this country are not fit for purpose.
Yeah, I was about to say that. It's not redundant, but
Sue
it's not
Gray,
fit for purpose.
Sue Gray
absolutely.
report,
Yeah.
an independent Sue Gray report,
Yeah.
and then she was on the blooming karaoke machine, which I thought was hysterical. Obviously, I don't think the fact that she used the karaoke machine
was, but that was
bought.
months
That was
before.
no, yeah, of course, it was bought months and months
She's
before.
not
It's just the fact that she was so close to it.
And I think we have a lot
Depends
more
what she
trust
was
in
singing.
Sue Gray.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I'm not
terms of
anti. I'm not
how
saying
good she is at what she does.
I'm not anti Sue Gray or anti karaoke. My point being that her proximity to everything was so close that
But
the
I think
things
she
she was
inspires.
investigating.
She inspires more confidence than someone like this, right? Because
Don't forget, there were her
she's
scope.
very good at what she does.
Her scope of what she could investigate. Some of the biggest parties at the ABBA party were not within scope.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
because it had been handed over to the Met already.
It's one great big chumocracy, as Peter Jukes would say if he was here. That's what it is. They all know each other.
Yeah.
They're all went to school with each other. They're all each other's
Can that be
godparents and
helped?
godfathers. Well, it can't be helped. But again, it's about social mobility and trying to bring people in who didn't all go to school with each other or Oxford with each other or who go to the same parties as each other.
Yeah.
They need to broaden it out. I mean, I'm the world's biggest critic of Brexit. However, Brexit has pulled back the curtain on the crumbling structures within this country and the truly appalling crappy nature of our government lying at the heart.
the Westminster
It's
bubble.
the Wizard of Oz moment. There's a wizard. Not a wizard, but a wizened, old, frail, decrepit individual hiding behind the curtain. And the country needs to change so many things. There have been hilarious scenes this morning from people on the Conservative right and the Brexit right suddenly saying, how dare these bishops sit in our House of Lords, right? I have been banging that drum for 10 bloody years. I've written multiple articles about it. I've been lambasted for it. I've written articles saying, how on earth are there bishops in the House of Lords?
Yeah.
Suddenly, when the bishops don't suit their purpose and aren't being sort of anti, same-sex marriage as they were, for example, that's all, oh no, we've got bishops in the House of Lords.
It's like they just realised, because about 800 of them, so they must have just clocked that from the 800.
There are 30 bishops, I think 32 or 33 bishops in the House of Lords. So they've been there since Cromwell left. There were a few more, but they've basically been there from time immemorial. So anyway.
So I think, great points, by the way. I think what this has highlighted is there is a need for something.
Yeah.
People keep talking about, do we need a written constitution? So historian Peter Hennessy, who is he's been a big fan of the constitution. It has held together our politics for as long as we can talk about, really. He talks about it as an old cardigan. It fits, it's keeps you warm.
flexible.
It's not perfect, but it works.
Yeah.
But not anymore.
No.
Boris Johnson has completely undone this good chap's theory of government because he is not a good chap, and he has surrounded himself by people who are also not good chaps.
I think it's because we had faith in a system that could fix what was broken, right? The benefits of our flexible constitution and the fact that it wasn't actually written in one place, it's not codified. It's not like the American constitution where they can read, every single line of it word for word like the second Bible. Is the fact that we had a certain trust in our institutions that no government is bound to the next one, and you can make legislation and change it as you see fit and stuff like that. I think with Boris, his such grotesque disregard for any sort of public show or any sort of, should I say, dignity, any sort of decency. I know. Just, his flagrant disregard for the rules and disrespect of the British public in that way. There is a sound argument there, and I personally say this as someone who doesn't have faith in the next sort of government. I don't know whether it'll be Labour. I really hope to God it's not Tory led by this clown. So I do see the argument for it.
Do you think so much of the way that politics works in this country is on an assumption that nobody will actually call the rules into play. There's so many prime ministers that we've had who could have acted in the way that Boris Johnson has, but there's a kind of this code of honour, unwritten code of conduct.
There's
That's like
a ministerial code of conduct.
there's an actual code of conduct which he's thrown out the window, but there's also an unspoken one of, well, yeah, but that's just not done, and you don't do that. Exactly, it's not proper and it's not fit. We just don't do that. Like when the speaker is announced, the other parties don't run a candidate in their constituency. That's a sort of, we just don't do that. And Boris Johnson, like you said, has thrown out the written rules. He's rewriting the unwritten rules, and I think it's exposing us. I know it's a very, very easy comparison to make between the UK and the US, but I want to make it. But Boris is our Trump. And
but he's very much our Trump.
Yeah.
Also, I'm a big enemy of everybody looking back with rose-tinted spectacles at some glorious past when gentlemen behaved, beyond.
And women wore skirts.
Yeah, and women wore skirts and, appear on television programmes. So unless they were in ball gowns.
Exactly.
But again, maybe, and I am an optimist, maybe long-term Brexit and Boris Johnson do us a favour because they expose all of this.
Yeah.
And maybe somebody comes along with a firm brush and starts sweeping away all of these antiquated. I mean, the whole opening of Parliament thing, the whole way Parliament is run is like something else.
Yes, it is.
In fact, Hogwarts looks sensible by comparison. Yeah.
Do you think if we'd had, if Starmer and Corbyn had happened the other way round, would Corbyn be doing better right now? Post Boris Johnson?
I'm afraid my opinion of Corbyn is not huge because I don't think he ever. Whenever I say that, I get trolled. But I don't mind being trolled again. I don't think either of them are up to much. No. And I think the Labour Party and this country, I don't know who the person is.
Exactly.
But they need a better leader of the Labour Party because
I think we can all agree that
there's this great, vast, open goal at the other side of the pitch. And nobody is kicking the ball into the goal. And the Labour Party hasn't risen to the challenge. The Lib Dems haven't risen to the challenge. The Greens, for some reason, even though they have a lot of votes, are kind of kept in a back cupboard and nobody ever puts their representatives on question time or anything. That's a great big open goal on constitutional change and all of those things, and nobody's having that discussion. Yeah. And I don't know why they're so cowardly. It reminds me of the German fleet in 1917, after the Battle of Jutland. The German fleet goes in, they engage with the British, they pretty much win, but they're so shaken by it that they retreat and they put their fleet in docks for the rest of the First World War, thus losing the First World War, and that's what Labour's doing.
Yeah. But the thing, I'm really happy you've said that we shouldn't look at the past with rose-tinted glasses, because I genuinely think that's a problem. However, and when I get trolled for saying this, that, to a very small part of me, probably like the end of my toe, misses, Cameron and even Blair, because I thought, if the recommendation that Priti had bullied civil servants and should have stepped down, I do think he would have made her step down if Cameron was still Prime Minister. I do think Blair would have made her step down. I even think Gordon Brown would have made her step down. And that's not to say that these people are extraordinary, but it's just to show how far things have fallen and how far we've declined. I'm so embarrassed.
The Emperor has no clothes. Yeah. And literally the only thing that's stopping us from seeing his naked, well, some of us, is the fact that he's got these cabinet ministers around him. And if he fires her, more people are going to see that he's stopped.
It's the Peter principle. It's people who have been elevated way beyond their means. And you see it across Johnson's cabinet. But it's a cabinet lacking in any
character.
And character. Patel should not be on any front bench.
Rishi Sunak should not be anywhere.
But she finds herself as Secretary of State. These people are only in positions because of their loyalty, blind loyalty to Johnson and to his Brexit, which everyone is starting to see now.
Sunak needs to go. It's a failure. What's the lady that keeps trying to get rid of the BBC?
Doris.
Needs to go. I mean, she actually embarrasses me the most because I unfortunately follow her Twitter feed. So I just...
You haven't been blocked?
I have not been.
So I have a relative who lived in the US for a decade. I won't say who this relative is, but I have a relative. The relative is totally uninterested in politics. And about 3 weeks ago, very late at night, rang me. And I was a bit taken aback because no one rings late at night anymore. This isn't the 1980s. And I said, hello. She said, I can't believe Nadine Dorries is in government. And I said to her, how do you know who Nadine Dorries is? Because this person is totally disengaged and uninterested in politics. Oh, I used to work with her.
Oh, wow.
And every day at lunchtime, she would come round trying to find someone to go to lunch with, and we would all literally hide.
I saw this tweet, yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
my God.
And she said, and I can't believe that somebody of that calibre has risen to be a government minister.
What's she got on him?
Literally, I've
There's-
heard this so many times that there's so many ministers that have.
Yeah, and I hate. And
Well, look at, what's his face, fireplace salesman, Gavin Williamson. The
Yes.
only reason he could have been given his
a
knighthood
knighthood. He knows where the
was because he knows
bodies
where
are
the- yeah,
buried.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's-
Exactly
Well, how
that.
many kids? I actually genuinely believe Boris has 20 children. We just don't know. We don't understand it because we don't understand how his male virility supposedly
Just
goes
one
that
look.
far.
But that's it. He's got that. I hate to say it, but he has something about him that means, he walked into the hospital recently, didn't he? And people started booing him. Staff members were booing him. And instead of hiding away, he went, yes, I know, I understand. I would boo me too. And then he won them round. But I think the crunch point had to have been outside the steps, Westminster Abbey on the Thanksgiving service during the Jubilee, when that BBC reporter went, oh, there's quite a significant amount of booing.
Yeah.
You
Wonderful
couldn't-
TV.
It was incredible. It was so gripping. That's it now. I think
the Tories risk permanent, and I say this as someone who tends to lean more conservative voting, but I have switched my vote in my lifetime because they don't pay me. The Tories are risking serious and permanent reputational damage by keeping this clown on. And I've said this so many times, and I've said this not just because of, the current base who are still not happy with them, but actually young voters, right? Because I think there is a misconception that all young voters are just vote Labour and, that's where they lean and they're socialists until they start paying taxes and all these stereotypes. But I genuinely think this party has nothing to offer young people. And I think you insult their intelligence when you have this buffoon who has no regard for the public, no respect for the public, as the leader of the Conservative Party. I think there's no coming back from that.
Let's wrap up there because we are out of time. Thank you for that, Esther. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Otto. We agreed on not very much, but we were
agreed on more than I
Nadine
thought.
Dorries is insufferable. I think
Yes.
that's something we had.
So is
Glue
Boris.
that could bind this nation
And
together.
it could be, she could
Mutual
be.
hatred of
She could
Nadine
be.
And Boris.
And Boris, yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our guests. And thank you for tuning in. What did you think? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't already. And we will catch you next time.